On Mother's Day, my millionaire son visited me and asked, "Are you enjoying the $7,000 a month, Mom?" I was perplexed and replied, "Son, the church is helping me survive." That's when his ambitious daughter-in-law opened the door. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment on which city you're watching from. That way I can see how far my story has come." The doorbell rang at exactly 3 p.m., as it always did when Ricardo came to visit. 63 years of living in this same house had taught me to recognize the sounds that announced important visitors, and today was Mother's Day. I hurried to open the door, drying my hands on the apron I always wear when I cook. I had prepared mole con pollo, my son's favorite dish since he was little. The aroma filled the entire house, mingling with the scent of the gardenias I had cut from the garden to decorate the table. "Mom." Ricardo hugged me with that perfect smile he'd always had, the same one he wore when I was a kid and had done something he was proud of. He was wearing an expensive suit, the kind that cost more than I spend in 3 months. His shoes were so shiny I could see my reflection in them. "My dear son, how nice to have you here." He kissed him on the cheek, noticing the scent of his expensive lotion, so different from the plain soap I use. Come in, everything is ready for you." Samantha walked in behind him as she always did. My daughter-in-law wore a white dress that surely cost more than my 6-month rent, and her perfectly manicured nails held a bouquet of expensive flowers as she gave me a hug that felt cold, mechanical. "Happy Mother's Day, Alicia," he said in that sweet voice that had never completely convinced me. There was something in his eyes that always made me uncomfortable, as if he were constantly calculating something. We sat in the living room. The same one where Ricardo had played when he was little, where he had studied for his university exams, where he had announced he was going to marry Samantha 5 years ago. The furniture was old, but well kept. Every cushion was in its exact place. Every surface clean, even though he no longer had the money to buy the cleaning products he used to. "Mom." Ricardo settled into the main chair, the one that had belonged to his father before he died 10 years ago. "I have to ask you something important." His tone changed. He was no longer the loving son who had just arrived. Now there was something serious in his voice, something that made my stomach clench. Samantha sat down next to him, but I noticed she remained very quiet, quieter than usual. "Tell me, son. Do you know you can ask me anything?" Ricardo looked me straight in the eyes with that intensity he had inherited from his father. "Are you happy with the 7,000 pesos I send you every month?" "Mom?" The world stopped. 7,000 pesos every month. The words echoed in my head like distant bells I couldn't fully understand. I felt as if the air had become thicker, harder to breathe. "Excuse me, son?" My voice came out weaker than I expected. "The 7,000 pesos a month, Mom, I've been sending you religiously for 8 months. I wanted to make sure you're comfortable, that you don't lack anything." Ricardo smiled proudly, as if he expected me to tell him how grateful I was, but I didn't understand a thing. 7,000 pesos a month. If I had received that amount, my life would be completely different. I wouldn't have to go to St. Joseph's Church every Tuesday and Friday to pick up the groceries the Temple Sisters organize. I wouldn't have to count every peso before going to the market. I wouldn't have to ask Don Joaquin, my neighbor, to help me turn off the light when it piles up. "Ricardo," I said slowly, feeling my heart begin to beat faster. "Son, I haven't received any money from you." The smile vanished from his face immediately. "What do you mean, you haven't received any money?" "Mom, I send you 7,000 pesos on the 15th of every month. Samantha is in charge of delivering them to you personally." My eyes moved to Samantha automatically. She had been very still throughout the conversation, but now her face had changed completely. She no longer had that usual calculating expression. Now she looked scared. "Samantha comes here every month," Ricardo continued, looking at his wife. "She tells me that you two talk, that she gives you the money, and that you are always very grateful." I felt as if a deep pit had opened up in my stomach. "Samantha visited me, yes, but not every month. Maybe once, every 3 or 4 months. And they were always short, awkward visits, where we barely spoke about superficial things. She had never, ever given me money. Son, my voice, I was trembling now. Your wife hasn't given me any money. I live with help from St. Joseph's Church. Every week I go to the grocery store the sisters organize, and when a bill piles up, I have to ask the neighbors or the parish for help. The silence that followed was deafening. Ricardo looked at Samantha with an expression I'd never seen before. His eyes had hardened like when he was a child, and he'd discovered someone had broken something valuable and was trying to figure out who had done it. Samantha, he said in a voice that sounded dangerous. What's going on here? Samantha abruptly got up from the armchair. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she tried to compose a smile. Oh, Alicia, I think you're a little confused. Don't you remember our visits? We always chat for a while, and I leave the envelope with the money on the kitchen table. But I knew perfectly well that wasn't true. My memory was perfect. I could remember every detail of every day. Desperation began to grow in my chest like an animal cage that wants to get out. No, Samantha, that's not true. You haven't given me any money. If I had received 7,000 pesos every month, my life would be completely different. Ricardo stood up slowly. At that moment, I heard someone knocking on the door. Samantha practically ran to open it as if looking for any excuse to escape this conversation. When she opened the door, I was surprised to see Sister Carmen from San Jose Church. She was an older woman in her 70s who coordinated the aid program for needy families. Good afternoon, Alicia. Sorry to interrupt, but I came to bring you this week's groceries and to remind you that tomorrow there is a meeting to organize next month's collection. Sister Carmen came in with a grocery bag full of basic supplies: rice, beans, oil, a few cans of tuna. It was exactly the kind of help a person without regular resources would need to survive. Ricardo looked at the bag, then he looked at Sister Carmen, then he looked at me. His face had changed completely. There were no more doubts in his eyes, only a cold fury that reminded me of her father when he discovered a lie. Sister Carmen, unaware of the unfolding drama, continued speaking. Alicia is always so grateful for the community's help. It's a blessing to be able to support our older siblings who live with limited resources. Samantha had frozen by the door, holding the knob as if it was the only thing keeping her standing. Ricardo closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, the fury had been replaced by something worse: utter disappointment. At that moment, I knew something fundamental had changed forever in my family. The truth had come out, but the price of that truth would be higher than any of us could imagine. Sister Carmen left after leaving me the pantry, unaware that I had just witnessed the moment that would change everything. The atmosphere in the living room had become so thick that it seemed the air itself weighed more. Ricardo stood in the middle of the room, looking alternately from Samantha to me, as if were pieces of a puzzle he couldn't solve. Samantha. My son said in a voice I'd never heard from him before, a voice that was scary. I want you to explain to me exactly what's going on here. Samantha was still by the door, her hands still on the knob. Her face had lost all color, and I could see small beads of sweat forming on her forehead even though it wasn't hot. Ricardo, love, I think your mom is confused. You know how older people are, sometimes they forget things. Her voice was high-pitched and desperate. Those words hurt me more than any physical blow. Confused, I forget things. I remembered every peso I spent, every favor I received, every day I had to decide between buying medicine or food. Samantha, I interrupted, my voice louder than I expected. I'm not confused. I haven't received a single peso from my son in these past 8 months. If I had, I wouldn't be living on charity from the church. Ricardo walked toward his expensive leather briefcase and pulled out his cell phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, and I could see the tension in his shoulders from the way his jaw clenched. Let's figure this out right now, he murmured. More for himself than for us. Here are all the transfers. He walked over to me and showed me his phone screen. There they were, one after the other, 8 transfers of 7,000 pesos each, all directed to an account he claimed was mine. "See, Mom? Here it is. October 15th, November 15th, December 15th. He kept reading off the dates, but I couldn't focus on his words because something terrible was growing in my chest. "Ricardo, son, I don't have that bank account. My only account is the one I opened 20 years ago at the bank on the corner, and I only have 300 pesos in it." Ricardo stopped dead in his tracks, looked at his phone screen, then at me, then back at Samantha. She had started to back toward the door, like a cornered animal looking for an exit. "Samantha." Ricardo's voice was now a dangerous whisper. "Whose bank account is this? I don't know what you're talking about, love. There must be some mistake." But Ricardo was already dialing a number on his phone. I could vaguely hear someone's voice on the other end of the line. Probably someone from the bank. "Yes, I need to verify some account information." "Yes, I can provide my ID. It's an account I've been transferring money to." The conversation lasted several minutes. During that time, Samantha and I were silent, but I could feel her eyes on me. When I finally looked up at her, I saw something in her expression that sent a chill through me. She didn't look scared anymore, she looked angry, as if I were to blame for what was happening. Ricardo hung up the phone and sat still for a moment with his eyes closed. When he opened them, I realized my son had changed forever. "The account is in the name of Samantha Rodriguez de Mendez," he said in a voice so cold it seemed to come from winter. "My wife has been receiving the money I thought I was sending to my mother." The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the birds in the garden that normally sang all afternoon could be heard. It was as if the entire world had stopped to witness this moment. Samantha finally let go of the doorknob and walked to the center of the room, but instead of looking defeated, she straightened and looked at me with an expression that chilled my blood. "It's okay. Yes. The money was coming into my account, but it's not what you think." Ricardo approached her with slow, deliberate steps. "It's not what we think, Samantha. That money was for my mother." "Where is it?" "I was saving it for her." He lied through his teeth. He wanted to accumulate a large amount before giving it to her so it would be a nice surprise. "I have all the money saved." But I knew that wasn't true. He had seen how Samantha's lifestyle had changed in recent months. The new dresses every time he saw her, the jewelry she didn't have before, the new car she had supposedly bought with savings from her job at the boutique. "Show us that money," Ricardo said. "It's in the house, in our safe. We can go look for it right now." Ricardo nodded, but then looked at me. "Mom, do you want to come with us?" Ricardo and Samantha's house was in an expensive residential neighborhood, full of large houses with perfect gardens and luxury cars at each entrance. I had always felt uncomfortable there, as if I didn't belong to that world, but today the discomfort was different. Today I was afraid. When we arrived, Samantha led us to Ricardo's study, where they had a safe built into the wall. With trembling hands, she entered the combination and opened the metal door. Inside were some important documents, some jewelry, and a white envelope. Samantha took the envelope and handed it to Ricardo. "Here is all your mom's money, the whole 56,000 pesos." Ricardo opened the envelope. Inside was money, but when he counted it, his expression darkened even more. "There are only 12,000 pesos here, Samantha." "Well, I had to use a little for household expenses. But I always thought to replace it before giving it to your mom." It was at that moment that I realized it wasn't just about money, it was about respect, trust, and familial love. Samantha had taken the money my son so lovingly sent me and spent it on herself while I ate thanks to the church's charity. Household expenses. Ricardo practically roared. "Samantha, that money was for my mother. My mother has been living in poverty while you spent her money on your clothes and your whims." "Ricardo, calm down. I can explain everything to you." But Ricardo wasn't listening anymore. He had walked over to the desk and opened a laptop. His fingers were flying over the keyboard with controlled fury. "I'm going to check all of our bank accounts, Samantha. I'm going to see exactly what my mother spent her money on. In that moment, I saw Samantha's face change completely. The mask of the perfect wife fell away completely, and what was left was something cold, calculating, without remorse. Do what you want, Ricardo, but remember that I am your wife. Your mother won't be here forever, but I will. Those words pierced me like daggers. Not only had she stolen my money, but now she was threatening me, reminding my son that he would have to choose between the two of us. And in that moment, as I watched my son paralyzed between his mother and his wife, I knew the worst was yet to come. The days that followed that terrible afternoon felt like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Ricardo didn't speak to me for a full week, an entire week, without hearing my only son's voice, without knowing if we could ever repair what had been broken between us. When he finally called me, his voice sounded tired, as if he had aged years in those few days. Mom, we need to talk. I'm going there. He arrived alone, without Samantha, which gave me a small hope. Maybe I had made the right decision, maybe I had seen the truth clearly, but when he walked into my house, his expression told me everything I needed to know. He didn't come as my repentant son, he came as a man who had made a difficult decision. Mom, please sit down. His tone was formal, distant, as if I were a client in his office and not the woman who had carried him for 9 months. I sat down in my favorite chair, that rocking chair where I used to sing to him when he was little, where I had spent all night when he had a fever, where I had listened to his problems as a teenager. Now it felt like I was sitting in the dock. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, Ricardo began, avoiding direct eye contact. And I think there are things you need to understand. Tell me, son. My voice came out smaller than I expected. Samantha made a mistake, yes, but she's been under a lot of pressure lately. Her job at the boutique hadn't gone well, and she thought she was doing the right thing by saving the money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Saving the money while I ate beans from the church charity. Ricardo, son, she spent the money on clothes, on jewelry. She wasn't saving it for me. Mom, I understand that you're upset, but Samantha is my wife, she's the mother of my future children. I can't just abandon her because of a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, that word, hurt me more than any insult. My son was calling the fact that his wife had stolen from me and let me live in poverty for 8 months a misunderstanding. Ricardo, it's not a misunderstanding, it's theft, it's lying, it's betrayal. Mom, enough is enough. His voice had hardened. Samantha has explained everything to me. She was afraid to tell you she had the money because she thought you would get angry if you hadn't asked her directly. She didn't know how to handle the situation. And that's why she bought new dresses. Is that why she changed her car? Ricardo sighed. Deeply, as if I were a spoiled child who didn't understand adult things. Mom, some of those purchases were necessary for her job. She has to look professional, and the car, well, her old car, broke down. Every word out of my son's mouth tore me apart a little more. I could see that Samantha had worked on it, that she had cast doubt on my version of events, that she had found an explanation for every one of her lies. And what about the missing money, Ricardo? We only found 12,000 pesos of the 56,000 you sent me. Samantha explained that she had some medical expenses she hadn't told me about. Girly stuff, but she's going to replace everything gradually. I was silent for a moment, processing what I had just heard. My son had chosen to believe his wife's lies over his mother's word. He had decided it was easier to think I was exaggerating or confused than to accept that he had married a thief. Ricardo, I finally said, do you seriously think I would be lying about this? Do you think I would make up a story like that? For the first time in the conversation, she looked me straight in the eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart. I saw doubt. I saw my son wondering if his 63-year-old mother was losing her mind, if she was making up stories out of spite or jealousy toward her daughter-in-law. Mom, I don't think you're lying, but I think maybe things aren't exactly as you remember them. Those words were like a slap in the face. My own son doubted my sanity, my memory, my honesty. Samantha had managed to plant the seed of doubt, and that seed had grown into a tree that now separated us. It's okay, Ricardo. I got up from the rocking chair, suddenly feeling very old, very tired. If that's what you think of your mother, then there's nothing more to talk about. Mom, don't be like that. I'm just trying to be fair to everyone. Fair. The laugh that came from my throat sounded bitter. Hollow. Fair, it's fair to let your wife steal the money you send me, while I, as if thanks to charity. Doubt your mother's word. Ricardo stood up too, but he didn't come to me. He stayed on the other side of the room, as if there were an invisible wall between us. Mom, Samantha has agreed to pay you back gradually. We're going to set up a different system for the transfers. Everything's going to be okay. No, Ricardo, it's not going to be okay. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden where he had played as a child. Your wife stole from me and humiliated me, and you're choosing to protect her instead of defending your mother. It's not like that, Mom. I'm not choosing anyone. I turned to look at him one last time. Yes, son. Yes, you are choosing, and your choice is very clear. Ricardo remained motionless for a moment, as if he was waiting for me to say something else, to give him permission to leave with a clear conscience, but I had nothing more to give him. I love you, Mom, I will always love, but Samantha is my wife and I have to protect my marriage. And I am your mother, Ricardo, but it seems that means nothing anymore. He left without kissing my cheek, without hugging me, without looking back. I watched him walk away through the window, get into his expensive car, and disappear around the corner. At that moment, I knew I had lost more than money. I had lost my son. The following days were the darkest of my life. Ricardo didn't call me, didn't visit me, didn't answer my messages. It was as if I had died to him, as if the 63 years of unconditional love I had given him had been erased from his memory. But the worst came when I started hearing the comments. Mrs. Martinez, my neighbor across the street, told me that she had seen Samantha at the supermarket, complaining to her friends about problematic mothers-in-law who make up stories to get attention. Don Joaquin, who had helped me so many times with the electricity bills, told me that he had heard rumors that I was losing my memory and that was why there were problems in the family. Samantha had begun a silent but effective campaign to destroy my reputation. She didn't attack me directly, but she sowed doubt about my mental stability, about my version of events, about my ability to remember things correctly. And the most painful thing of all was knowing that Ricardo was probably hearing those same stories at home, that every night Samantha reminded him how confused his mother was, how difficult it was to deal with me, how much better it would be for everyone if we kept our distance. One afternoon, as I was sweeping the yard, I saw a car pull up in front of my house. For a moment, my heart leapt, thinking it was Ricardo who had come to apologize. But when Samantha came out alone, all hope faded. She was dressed in new clothes again, carrying bags from expensive stores. She approached my door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hello, Alicia. Can we talk? I let her in more out of curiosity than courtesy. I wanted to hear what new lie she had come to tell me. I came to bring you this, she said, taking an envelope out of her bag. It's 2,000 pesos. It's part of the money I owe you. I took the envelope, feeling the thickness of the bills inside. It was real money, but somehow it felt dirty in my hands. I also wanted to apologize to you. She continued to sit in my living room as if she owned the place. I know I made mistakes, but I want you to know that it was never my intention to hurt you. Your intention was to steal from me. Don't call him stealing, Alicia. It was a misunderstanding, a bad decision. But Ricardo and I have talked, and we're going to do things right from now on. I sat across from her, studying her face. There was no real remorse there. No genuine guilt. Only calculation, strategy, the satisfaction of who knows they've won. What do you really want, Samantha? Her smile grew wider, colder. I want us to have a good relationship, Alicia, for Ricardo's sake. He's very stressed with all this conflict, and I just want us to be a happy family. A happy family. I repeated, how can there be a happy family when it's built on lies? They are not lies, Alicia. There are different perspectives on the same events, and I think it would be better for everyone if we left the past in the past. At that moment, I fully understood what was going on. Samantha hadn't come to apologize or make peace. She had come to establish the ground rules. She was telling me that I had won, that Ricardo was on her side, and that my only option was to accept her version of events if I wanted to maintain any kind of relationship with my son. If not, I could leave the past in the past. Her smile faded for a second, and in her eyes, I saw a flash of something dangerous. Well, Alicia, that would be your decision, but Ricardo is very loyal to the people he loves, and right now, the person he loves most in the world is me. She stood up, smoothed down her expensive skirt, and walked toward the door. Think about it, Alicia. Do you really want to lose your son because of pride? When she left, I sat in my living room holding the envelope with the 1,000 pesos. It was a small fraction of what she had stolen from me, but it was also something more. It was the price she was offering me. For my silence, for my dignity, for accepting to live in a world where her lies were worth more than a mother's truth. And for the first time since this whole nightmare had begun, I realized that maybe I had already lost my son forever. 3 months passed like an eternity. 3 months without hearing Ricardo's voice, without a message, without a call, without even a word through third parties. It was as if my son had decided that I no longer existed. As if the 63 years of unconditional love I had showered on him had completely evaporated. The 2,000 pesos Samantha had given me quickly ran out. I spent them on medicine for my blood pressure, which had started to rise since this whole problem began, and on some urgent repairs around the house. The water tank had broken, and Don Joaquin, my neighbor, had helped me fix it, but I had to pay him for the materials. I returned to relying completely on the church's food pantry. Every Tuesday and Friday, I walked the 6 blocks to the parish of San Jose. I stood in line with other elderly women and needy families and received my bag of rice, beans, oil, and some canned goods. Sister Carmen always greeted me with a genuine smile. But I could see the growing concern in her eyes. "AIA, are you sure there's no way your family can help you more?" she asked me one Tuesday afternoon as I reviewed the list of beneficiaries for the food pantry program. I didn't know how to respond. How do you explain to a nun that your only son has abandoned you because he prefers to believe the lies of his thieving wife? How do you tell her that you've lost not only your money, but also the love and respect of the only family you had? It's complicated, Sister Carmen. My family is going through a difficult time. She nodded understandingly, but didn't press further. She was a wise woman who had seen many sad stories in her years of community work. The greatest humiliation came one Thursday afternoon. I had gone to the market with the few pesos I had, trying to stretch the money to buy some chicken to supplement my living expenses. The beans from the pantry. I was at Don Ramon's butcher's shop, where I had shopped for years, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Alicia." I turned around and saw Comadre Mercedes, a woman I had met at Ricardo's birthday parties when he was a child. She was the mother of one of his elementary school friends, and although we didn't see each other often, we had always maintained a cordial relationship. "Mercedes, it's so nice to see you," I said, trying to sound casual as Don Ramon wrapped my small purchase of 200 g of chicken. "Oh, Alicia, I'm so glad to run into you. I recently ran into your daughter-in-law, Samantha, at the new mall." My stomach immediately tightened. "Oh, yes, yes. She was shopping in those very expensive stores. She was carrying bags from boutiques I wouldn't dream of going into. She looked beautiful, very elegant." Mercedes smiled, but there was something in her eyes that made me nervous. We chatted for a while, and she told me that Ricardo spoils her, that he gives her everything she wants. "That's great," I murmured, paying Don Ramon my 200 pesos. "But she also told me something that worried me a lot, Alicia." Mercedes's voice had become more serious, more intimate. "She told me that you've been a little confused lately, that sometimes you forget things or make up situations that didn't happen." I felt like someone had poured a bucket of ice water over me. What exactly did she say? "Oh, Alicia, I don't want to get involved in family problems, but she told me that sometimes you accuse people of things they didn't do, that Ricardo is very concerned about your mental state, that they're considering taking you to a specialist doctor. Mercedes's words felt like stabs. Not only had Samantha stolen from me and convinced my son that I was crazy, but now she was spreading that lie all over the neighborhood, destroying my reputation with people who'd known me for years. Mercedes, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Do you really think I would make up stories? She looked at me with an expression that was half pity, half discomfort. Oh, Alicia, I've known you for many years, and you've always been a very level-headed woman. But age sometimes does strange things to all of us. My own mother in her later years sometimes said things that made no sense. I'm not senile, Mercedes. Of course not, dear. But maybe it would be good for you to talk to a doctor, right? Just to put the family's mind at ease. I left the market feeling as if I were carrying an enormous weight on my shoulders. Chest. Not only had I lost my son and been robbed by my daughter-in-law, but now everyone in the neighborhood thought I was losing my mind. That night, sitting in my rocking chair, looking at the photos of Ricardo I had in the living room, I realized how completely alone I was. He had no living siblings. My parents had died years ago and the few cousins I had lived in other states. Ricardo had been my only real family, my only purpose, my only reason to keep going after his father died, and now I had nothing. The days became a mechanical survival routine. I would get up, do housework, watch a little television, cook with the little I had and go to bed early so as not to waste electricity. The weekends were the worst, because they used to be when Ricardo visited me. When my house was filled with laughter and life. One Saturday morning I was watering the garden plants when I saw a familiar car parking in front of my house. My heart raced because I thought it was Ricardo, but when the door opened, Samantha came out, but this time she didn't come alone. With her came an older woman I didn't know, very well dressed, with expensive glasses and an air of authority that immediately put me on alert. Samantha approached the door with her usual fake smile, but the woman with her was looking at me with an appraising expression, as if I were a laboratory specimen. Hello, Alice. I present to you Dr. Patricia Vega. She is a specialist in, well, memory problems in older adults. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. A doctor. Yes, Dr. Vega intervened with a professional, but condescending voice. Your daughter-in-law has told me about some worrying episodes she has had lately: confusion, memory loss, unfounded accusations towards family members. I haven't had any episodes of confusion, I said, feeling anger rising in my chest. Mrs. Mendez, the doctor consulted a notebook she was carrying in her hand. According to what your family tells me, you have been accusing your daughter-in-law of stealing money that never existed, of inventing visits that did exist. Occurred, to create family conflicts based on imaginary situations. That's not true. My voice came out louder than I expected. Samantha, yes, she stole the money that my son sent me. The doctor and Samantha exchanged a look that made me feel like I was a petulant child having a tantrum. Mrs. Mendez, the doctor continued, denial is very common in these cases. Patients with early cognitive impairment frequently. I do not have cognitive impairment, I shouted, completely losing control. Samantha is a thief and a liar, and she has convinced my son that I am crazy. Alicia, please calm down, Samantha said in a soft voice, acting as if she were the victim of an out-of-control old lady. Look how you're acting, that's why we're worried about you. The doctor took quick notes in her notebook. Aggression, paranoia, persistent accusations towards family members. Yes, we definitely need to do some studies. I don't need any studies. I need my son to stop believing this woman's lies. Mrs. Mendez. The doctor closed her notebook and looked at me with an expression of false compassion. I understand this is difficult for you, but your family just wants to help you. There are medications that can help with these symptoms. Get out of my house. I shouted, no longer able to contain the tears of frustration and anger. Both of you get out now. Samantha and the doctor left, but before they got in the car I heard the doctor tell Samantha, there are definitely clear signs of deterioration. I'm going to write a report so they can start the legal guardianship process if necessary." Those words made my blood run cold. Guardianship. They wanted to declare me mentally incapable so that Ricardo and Samantha could completely control my life. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the entire house looking at every corner, every object that had witnessed the life I had built for 63 years. My house, where I had raised Ricardo, where I had taken care of my husband until the day he died, where I had lived every important moment of my life. And now they wanted to take everything from me based on the lies of a woman who had stolen from me and who had manipulated my son into abandoning me. For the first time since this whole nightmare had begun, I felt something stronger than sadness and despair. I felt a cold, calculating rage growing in my chest like a fire that had been dormant for too long. I wasn't going to let them declare me crazy. I wasn't going to let Samantha win completely, and I definitely wasn't going to let them take my house and my dignity away from me without a fight. But to fight he needed weapons. And for the first time in months I began to think like a woman who had survived 63 years in this world, not as a helpless victim. The war was just beginning. The call came on a Tuesday morning when I was making my chamomile tea. The phone rang with that insistence that indicates that something important is about to happen. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something inside me told me to answer. Mrs. Alicia Mendez, the voice was that of a young, professional man. "Yes, it's me. My name is Roberto Castillo. I am an accountant. I work for his son Ricardo and his company. Could you come see her this afternoon? It is very important." My heart started beating faster. "Is everything okay with Ricardo?" "Your son is fine, ma'am, but I need to talk to you about some irregularities that I have found in the accounts." That afternoon Mr. Castillo arrived at my house with a thick folder full of documents. He was a man of about 40 years old with a serious face and glasses that gave him a very formal look. But when he looked at me, I saw passion in his eyes. "Mrs. Mendez, what I am going to show you may be very painful, but I think you have the right to know it." He sat in my living room and opened the folder on the coffee table. Inside were account statements, copies of transfers, and reports that I didn't fully understand, but that clearly showed money movements. As his son's accountant, I have access to all the company and personal accounts he manages through us. A few weeks ago, Ricardo asked me to review the transfers he has been sending to you. He asked her for that. Yes, I think he was starting to have doubts about what his wife had told him. The lawyer pointed out a series of numbers on the paper. "These are the transfers from the last 8 months. 56,000 pesos in total sent to an account in the name of Samantha Rodriguez de Mendez." I already knew that. Yes, but what they didn't know is what happened next. He turned to another page. "Look at these movements. Every time the money arrived in her daughter-in-law's account, she immediately transferred it to another personal account she has in a different bank." My breathing became more labored. Another account, a secret account that his son didn't know about. And look what that money was spent on. He showed me a long shopping list. Designer clothes, jewelry, beauty treatments, trips, even payments on an apartment she's renting downtown. An apartment. "What do you want an apartment for, Samantha?" The lawyer looked at me with a very serious expression. "Mrs. Mendez, I think your daughter-in-law is planning to divorce your son. The apartment is in his name. He has been accumulating personal assets and has been moving money to accounts that Ricardo cannot touch." I felt like the world had stopped. Ricardo knows this not yet. I just finished the research last night. But there is more. He took out another set of documents. "I also found that you have been using your son's corporate credit card for personal expenses. In total he has diverted almost 200,000 pesos in the last 2 years. 200,000 pesos. An amount that I couldn't even imagine while I had been eating charity beans and asking for help to turn off the light." "Graduate, are you going to show this to Ricardo?" "Yes, ma'am. In fact, I have an appointment with him tomorrow morning, but I wanted to talk to you first because I think you're going to need support when all this comes to light." That night I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning in bed thinking about everything the lawyer had shown me. It wasn't just that Samantha had stolen from me. She had been stealing from Ricardo as well, planning to abandon him after bleeding him financially. And the worst of all was knowing that my son had been defending a woman who was betraying him in the cruelest way possible. The next day, around noon, I heard a car stop in front of my house with a sudden brake. I looked out the window and saw Ricardo getting out of his car with his face completely upset. He came running towards my door and I knew that he had already spoken with Mr. Castillo. When I opened the door, my son looked like he had aged 10 years in one night. His eyes were red, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had in his hands the same folder that the lawyer had shown me the day before. "Mom," his voice came out broken. "Forgive me, please, forgive me." He fell into my arms like when he was a child and had nightmares. She cried on my shoulder for several minutes while I stroked her hair, as I had done thousands of times during her childhood. "Mom, you were right about everything. Samantha is not the woman I thought." I took him to the living room and poured him a glass of water. He looked devastated, completely broken. "Mr. Castillo taught me everything this morning. The statements, the transfers, the secret apartment, the credit cards, everything." He ran his hands over his face. "Mom, he's been stealing from me for years. Not just you, me too. Where is she now?" "I don't know. When I got home this morning after the meeting with Castillo, he was gone. He took all his things, emptied the safe, and left this." He showed me a handwritten letter. The handwriting was elegant, careful, but the words were like poison. "Ricardo, by the time you read this, I will already be gone. Our marriage has been a mistake from the beginning. You never gave me what I deserved. You always put your mother above me. I'm going with someone who does know how to value me. Don't try to look for me. I have already spoken to a lawyer and I am going to file for divorce." "Samantha, with anyone else?" I asked, although deep down I already suspected the answer. "Yes, Mom. It seems like she's been seeing another man for months. The apartment she rented was not for her alone." Ricardo broke down again. "Mom, I was an idiot. I defended her when you were telling me the truth. I doubted my own mother because of a woman who was lying to me about everything." I hugged him, feeling him tremble in my arms. "Ricardo, son, she manipulated you. It's what people like her do, but I should have known better. You are my mother. You have known me since before I was born. How could I doubt you? Because she was very good at what she did, son, and because you wanted to believe that you had found true love." We stayed hugging for a long time. For the first time in months I felt like I had my son back, not the man who had been defending a liar, but the boy I had raised with love and values. "Mom, I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to return all the money she stole from you with interest. I will pay all the medical expenses you need." "I'm going to Ricardo," I interrupted him gently. "Money is not the most important thing." "So what?" "The most important thing is that you learn from this, that you never doubt the people who really love you again just because someone else tells you pretty lies." He nodded, wiping away his tears. "Can you forgive me, Mom?" "I already forgave you from the moment you knocked on my door, son." But as she hugged him, she knew that although she had recovered Ricardo, the scars of these months would not be easily erased. I had lost trust in my son. I had lived in poverty while my daughter-in-law spent my money on luxuries. I had been humiliated in the neighborhood and almost declared mentally incompetent. Forgiveness was real, but I also needed Ricardo to understand that things couldn't go back to exactly the same as before. This experience had changed both of us and the new relationship we built would have to be different. Ricardo finally said, "There's something else we need to talk about." "What, Mom?" "The doctor Samantha brought here the report she made saying that I was losing my mind." Ricardo's face darkened. "Mom, that was Samantha's idea. She convinced me that you were having memory problems, that you needed medical help. And you thought it was necessary to bring a doctor without consulting me?" Ricardo lowered his head in shame. "Yes, Mom. And I deeply regret it." "Good, Because that doctor made an official report and that report could have been used to take away my home, my independence, my dignity. Mom, I would never have allowed it. Ricardo, you already allowed Samantha to control this situation for months. What guarantees me that you wouldn't have allowed them to take my house from me too? We looked at each other in silence for a moment. It was a difficult question, but necessary. Ricardo needed to fully understand the damage that had been done, not only by the stolen money, but by the betrayal of his trust. You're right, Mom. I have no right to ask you to automatically trust me after what happened. No, son, you don't, but you do have the opportunity to earn that trust again. He nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? First, I want you to go to that doctor and demand that she withdraw her report. I want to make it officially clear that there is nothing wrong with my mind. Done. Second, I want you to get back every peso that Samantha stole. Not just what belonged to me, but everything he stole from you too. I'm already working on it with Mr. Castillo. And third, I said, looking him straight in the eyes, I want you to understand that our relationship is going to be different from now on. I love you, Ricardo, but I will no longer accept being treated as a burden or as someone who can be easily doubted. I understand, Mom, I really do. Yes. And I promise you that I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that I deserve your forgiveness. I looked at him for a long moment, studying his face, searching for signs of genuine sincerity. What I saw there was a broken man who had finally learned a very hard lesson about the value of true family. Okay, Ricardo, let's try it. But as we held each other again, I knew that even though Samantha was gone, the consequences of her lies and manipulations would be with us for a long time. The difference was that now we would face them together as mother and son and not as enemies separated by the lies of a stranger. Months after Samantha disappeared from our lives, reality had settled like dust after a storm. Ricardo had kept his promises. He recovered all the stolen money, had Dr. Vega officially withdraw her report, and divorced Samantha without fighting over any material assets. She had taken what she could and disappeared with her lover, leaving behind only debts and lies. But the biggest changes didn't have to do with money or legal documents, they had to do with us. Ricardo now visited me every Sunday, as he had done for years before marrying Samantha. But these visits were different. He no longer came as the successful son who condescended to see his poor mother. He came as a humble man who had learned the value of true family in the most painful way possible. Mom, he told me one Sunday while we were eating the mole I had prepared for him. I've been thinking about something. Tell me, son, would you like to come live with me? The house feels very empty and I think it would do me good to have you around. The proposal took me by surprise. Ricardo's house was beautiful, big, full of comforts that I had never had. But after everything that had happened, the idea of depending on him again, even with the best of intentions, made me uncomfortable. Ricardo, I thank you for your help. Offer, but I'm fine here in my house. But Mom, you could have your own room, your private bathroom. You wouldn't have to worry about the expenses anymore. Son, I interrupted him gently. I don't understand, Mom, Ricardo, during the months that Samantha stole from me and you abandoned me. Very important. I learned that I can survive alone. I learned that I don't need anyone to take care of me to have dignity, but I want to take care of you. Mom. I want to make it up to you for everything I put you through and I thank you very much for that, son. But the way to make it up to me is not to make me dependent on you again. The way to compensate me is by respecting my ability to make my own decisions. Ricardo was quiet for a moment, processing my words. He had matured a lot in these months, but he still had a hard time understanding that I had changed too. So what do you want, Mom? I want us to be family, but as equals. I want you to visit me because you enjoy my company, not because you feel obligated. I want you to respect my decisions, even when you don't understand them. And I want you to never doubt my word again just because someone else tells you something different. I understand, really, he nodded slowly. I think so. You want love, not pity, respect, not charity. Exactly. We established new rules for our relationship. Ricardo gave me a reasonable monthly amount for my expenses, but in my own bank account, under my complete control. He visited me every Sunday, but if I ever didn't want visitors, he would respect that. And most important of all, I had promised that I would never again allow a third person to interfere in our mother-son relationship. The true test of these new boundaries came 3 months later, when Ricardo began dating a new woman. Her name was Elena. She was an elementary school teacher, divorced with an 8-year-old daughter. She was a simple, hard-working woman, very different from Samantha. But when Ricardo introduced her to me, I saw something in her eyes that made me alert. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Mendez," Elena told me with a smile that didn't completely convince me. "Ricardo has told me a lot about you." "I hope for good things," I responded, observing her carefully. Over the next few weeks I began to notice small details. Elena always found excuses for Ricardo not to visit me on Sundays. "We have plans with my daughter," or my family organized a meeting, and gradually Ricardo's visits became less frequent. One Sunday, when Ricardo hadn't come in 3 weeks, I decided to do something I had never done before. I called him. "Son, can we talk?" "Sure, Mom." "Is something wrong?" "Yes, something's up. I haven't seen you in 3 weeks." There was an awkward pause. "Mom, Elena has had many family activities and she wants me to participate." "Ricardo," I interrupted him. "Do you remember the conversation we had about not allowing third parties to interfere in our relationship?" Another pause. "Yes, Mom." "Good, because that's exactly what's happening again." "No, Mom, it's not the same. Elena is not like Samantha." "Maybe not, son, but the patterns are very similar. She is gradually pushing you away from me and you are allowing her to." "Mom, she just wants me to meet her family, to fit in." "And what about your family?" "Ricardo? What about me?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Elena had not explicitly prohibited visits to her mother-in-law, but she had done something more subtle and more effective. I had filled all of Ricardo's free spaces with activities that did not include me. "Mom, I don't want to fight you about this." "We're not fighting, son. We are having an honest conversation, and the conversation is this. If you want to have a relationship with me, you're going to have to make space for that relationship. If Elena can't understand that, then maybe she's not the right woman for you." "Mom, that's not fair. Elena is a good woman." "Maybe, but a good woman for you should be someone who respects the relationship you have with your mother. Not someone who tries to replace or minimize it." I hung up the phone feeling strangely calm. He had said what he had to say. I had set my boundaries clearly. Now Ricardo had to decide what was most important to him. 2 weeks passed without news from Ricardo. 2 weeks in which I wondered if I had been too harsh, if I had lost my son again because I was too demanding. But on the 3rd Sunday I heard the doorbell ring at 3 in the afternoon. When I opened the door I found Ricardo standing there alone. "Hello, Mom." "Hello, son." "And Elena." "Elena and I broke up." I let him in without asking questions. I made coffee and we sat in the living room like we had done hundreds of times before. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Ricardo sighed deeply. I explained to him that I needed to maintain my relationship with you, that Sundays were our time. She said she understood, but then she started making comments about how I was a mommy's man, about how I needed to be independent from you. "And what did you tell him?" I told him that my mother had been there for me all my life, that she had sacrificed everything to give me a good education and a good future. I explained to him that respecting you and maintaining a relationship with you was not about being a mommy's man, but about being a good son. I felt a warmth growing in my chest. And what did she answer? She said I had to choose between having a serious relationship with her or remaining dependent on my mother. Ricardo looked me straight in the eyes, so I chose. "Don't you regret it?" "No, Mom. I learned my lesson with Samantha. I'm not going to let anyone else make me choose between love and loyalty. The right person for me will understand that you are part of my life and that is non-negotiable." We sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the coffee and the peace we had finally found. "Mom," Ricardo finally said, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How did you know you had to be so firm with me? How did you know not to let anyone else interfere?" I thought about your question for a moment, because during the months we were apart I learned something very important, son. I learned that it is better to be alone and have dignity than to be accompanied and disrespected. Aren't you afraid of being alone? No, Ricardo, because now I know the difference between being alone and being abandoned. Being alone is a choice you make to protect your peace. Being abandoned is something others do to you when they don't value what you have to offer. Ricardo nodded slowly. I think I learned that difference too. I hope so, son, because the next woman who enters your life is going to have to understand that respecting me is part of respecting you. We stayed talking until it became night. Ricardo helped me wash the dishes as he had done when I was young, and before leaving he hugged me with the same intensity as when I was a child. I love you, Mom, and I promise that I will never let anyone make me doubt that again. I love you too, son. When he left, I stayed in my rocking chair looking at the photos I had in the living room. Photos of Ricardo when he was a child, photos of my husband, photos of a life built with love and sacrifice. I had lost money, I had lost time, I had lost innocence about what people are capable of doing for money, but I had gained something more valuable. I had gained self-respect, clear boundaries, and a relationship with my son based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. Samantha had thought that destroying my relationship with Ricardo would give her control over him and access to his money. But in the end his betrayal had strengthened the bond between my son and me in a way that would never have been possible without that trial by fire. Now, when I wake up every morning, I don't do so as a victim of circumstance. I rise as a woman who survived, who fought and who won. Through revenge. But through silent dignity and unbreakable boundaries. And that, I thought as I turned off the lights and prepared to go to sleep, was the best revenge of all. Live well, with self-respect and with my son's love restored on terms that I had established. The war was over and I had won.